Leger, I love your topic. So we're going to start with that one. I'm curious to see where you go with this one, but I see it here in the notes and I want to hear more.
Yeah, it's kind of piggybacking off what we were kind of just talking about with Joe Douglas, right? And I thought the funny thing is I had picked this topic because of what had recently just happened with the Jets, not knowing that we were going to discuss, the firing of Joe Douglas until I looked at the rundown yesterday. So I'd already put that in the notes before doing that, and it's about roster construction in the NFL and how it's a real thing. And I know so many fans. This is not me taking a dig at fans think that the NFL is like Madden. You can just put pieces here and there and it's going to work out. But we've seen ample examples of how that doesn't work. Let's just go back to the 2011 Dream Team, quote unquote Dream Team from the Philadelphia Eagles. Just want to run down that roster and just tell you the type of players that were on that team. Vince Young, Michael Vick, LaShawn Shady McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, Jason Babin, who was a dog at that time, Nnamdi Asamoah, Cullen Jenkins, Dominique Rogers-Cromartie, Ronald Brown, Steve Smith, Evan Mathis. You know what that team finished? 8-8 on the year and didn't make the playoffs because roster construction is a real legit thing in the NFL. And when I say roster construction, right, everybody has to have a defined role. I liken that 2011 team to this Jets team this year, where it seemed like the Jets were just trying to pick names and put them on a roster and thought they were going to have success. Let's just break down the roster from last year to this year and why there was issues, right? Because if everybody doesn't have a defined role, then it's an issue. Let's look at the defense, right? This Jets defense has been a championship type defense since the 2022 season, 2023 season, right? But some of their frontline players that weren't on a roster this year, John Franklin Myers, right? John Franklin Myers is a guy who is one of the most underrated players in the league. He's that junkyard dog that does everything on the defensive front, right? He was the most versatile player they had where he can line up and down the line of scrimmage. Case in point, Kyle and Mike, I talked to some people that follow the Denver Broncos exclusively. And I asked him, because John Franklin Myers is my guy. I talk to him probably once or twice a week. I asked him, I said, how's JFM doing out there? They said, dudes, somebody from the Jets is getting fired for letting this guy go. No, that's literally what they told me. Somebody is getting fired because that was the impact that he made early on in camp, and they could tell that he was going to be something that was going to be special for them. When you add him to a guy like Zach Allen, who's one of the best interior pass rushers in all of football, Nick Bonito, who's really coming on the outside, you draft a guy like Jonah Ellis, and then you also have Jonathan Cooper on the outside. People wonder why this Denver Broncos defense is so good. One, because their secondary has really stepped up this year, and I'm not just talking about Surtain. Like Riley Moss, also Jaquan McMillan played really good. But also we know pass rush and coverage work together. And you need one player on that defensive line. And Kyle, you know this because you played offensive line. You need that one guy that holds everybody together. And that's what John Franklin Myers does, whether it's being aggressive at end, setting the vertical edge, or being able to kick inside on third down and do all the gritty work. I mean, this guy has 5 sacks this year already, right, in the interior. And when you look at the Jets now, they traded him because of money, because they wanted to get Hassan Reddick, because they thought Hassan Reddick would be a closer for him. Well, you know what happened? Hassan Reddick didn't even show up till like week 7 or 8, right? So now not only did you get rid of your most versatile piece on defense, now you got 2 voids because now you don't have John Franklin Myers or Hassan Reddick. Let's add that with the fact that Bryce Hall was a guy that really grew up in your program, undrafted free agent, right? Really developed there, led the Jets in sacks last year, homegrown player. And when you have homegrown players, you usually don't let them walk out the door, right? You can't let them walk out the door because it's not a good look when other teams or other free agents are coming in town and they're thinking about potentially signing with your team, but you're not signing your homegrown talent, right? They decided to let him go because they felt like he wasn't an every down starter. Now, it hasn't been great for him with the Philadelphia Eagles. This is why scheme and coaching matters, right? Because the Jets had a defined role for him when he became, when he ended up being a top tier frontline player for the Jets, whether he was a third end that came in on third down. And then you saw towards the back end of last year, he became a viable starter on first and second down. He wasn't a liability on first and second down. Well, they let him go in free agency because, again, they expected to get Hassan Reddick, and that didn't work out. And then Jermaine Johnson was the guy that was going to kind of pick up the slack for John Franklin Myers. He was a guy that was their energy guy. He goes down with an Achilles early on in the season. And now, because you don't have a JFM there or a Bryce Huff, now what do? Right? Your energy on defensive line is gone. That's why everybody has to have a defined role on a roster, right? You can't just put all-stars on the team. Excuse me, fellas. And I liken it to this. If you have a whole bunch of name guys on the team, who's holding those name guys accountable? Right? Like guys like John Franklin Myers could hold people accountable because teammates knew what he did and put in work-wise throughout the week. They knew that every Sunday he was going to lay it on the line. But when you have a roster like we just talked about on the Dream Team with the Eagles, when you have a roster like Devontae Adams, Hassan Reddick, Aaron Rodgers, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, like who's going to be the guy that holds those guys accountable, right? There always needs to be a guy that maybe doesn't have the name that those guys have, but everybody on the team respects him because of the work he puts in, and he's not afraid to say, hey, you're slacking today. Pick it up. Like, we need more of you. Like, you're supposed to be one of the frontline guys for us. That's why roster construction is so important. You cannot just put names on a roster, and you can't just draft guys if they don't have a defined role on your team. Like, there needs to be a guy that has a defined role on special teams, a guy that has a defined role on offense, a defined role on defense. And if you don't have that and you just put names on a roster, you're going to continue to see what happened with the Eagles and the Jets this year.
Yeah, that's well said there, Lige. That is well said. I really enjoyed the part that you said about who is going to hold the stars accountable if you're a star-heavy roster. And I think about some of these groups like Dallas, like the Jets, that have these huge names and seemingly no production as a team. And then when I think about the best teams I've been on, it's always been the guy that was not a Pro Bowler, that had no chance of, making the highlight reel, but when practice ended, they were the guy that pulled an assistant coach aside and went through extra drills and did more fits on the bat. And they were getting their squats in week 15 when everybody else was doing the pitch shark. You're familiar with the pitch shark, right? The pitch shark was what the offensive lineman did when it got too late in the season. But there was always those leaders that were unsung heroes. Mike Burton in Kansas City, who was a fullback during their Super Bowl runs. Guy was an animal. He was the guy that I'm describing. And people like Travis Kelce and even Patrick Mahomes would look to him for inspiration. So I like that part about roster building. Get the right guys in the building that can set the example for everybody. Coaches, chefs in the cafeteria, strength coaches, everybody is better because of these certain guys you're talking about, John Franklin Myers included.
Well, I think it's the biggest, and why every year I say free agency is oftentimes fool's gold. Free agency is the final piece of the puzzle. It is not where you build your team, because when you have these vets coming in, and you just look at the Jets roster, and it's guys who used to be stars elsewhere. It's Aaron Rodgers, it's Devontae Adams, it's Tyron Smith when they had Mike Williams, like guys who were big names, who were the guy at another spot already. They have no ties to the Jets. They are mercenaries for, in the NFL sense. They are not guys who came up and this means something to them, that if when adversity hits, that they have the culture to lean back on of whatever the New York Jets have built there. No, the adversity hits and it's a lot of finger pointing. It's a lot of guys saying like, man, this isn't, my franchise. This isn't, I'm a Packer for life, or I'm beholden to this other team. They're still just playing for, somewhat themselves, is like it or not. Like they just haven't had the blood, sweat, and tears over the years with the Jets to have that equity in the franchise. And their best players now for the Jets, their homegrown best players, are all guys who are like 24, 25, 26. They don't have, they haven't been there a while themselves either. So it's such a new conglomeration there that it was just going to be difficult to work out. And then once you fire the head coach, once you fire the guy who probably was your culture there, it's just a house of cards. I mean, that's why it was the worst decision in the world to do that. Like, I thought that was absolutely insane at the time to make that move, because what's holding these guys together then? Where's the cohesiveness when you don't have that guy at the top? It still is so much a team game. And like you mentioned, your whole point, you could put all these names together, but football is a cohesive unit on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. That has to be what it is for it to work. You can put all the Pro Bowlers you want out there. If they're not on the same page, it's not going to look good. So I do agree that their focus shifted far too quickly to, let me get this outside help to come fix this roster and make it good right now, as opposed to, man, we've been drafting all these guys so well of late. Let's just smooth out this roster via free agency and keep seeing how much we can build this up. I think they bit off too much that they could chew and went for the end goal too early. And I think you're seeing the results of what happened with that.
Okay.
Yeah. To your point, Mike. Go ahead, Kyle.
No, you got it.
Yeah, to your point, Mike, right? And I was adamant. You guys know about this. Again, a lot of love and respect for Woody. Personal relationship with him. I just thought the timing of it made no sense, right? There was more risk than reward when you talk about a team being led by its defense, right? And you fired the defensive-minded coach. Like, that's going to be more of a shock to the system than anything. And at the time he did it, they literally were about to play the Bills, and if they had won that game, fellas, they were going to be first in the division, right? So, like, the timing just made no sense. And then you elevate Ulbrich, who I love, and I hate this for him, right? Because it's not a really fair shake at him getting an opportunity to be a head coach. He's thrust into this essential mess, right, where not only does he have to keep his defense above water, but now he's in charge of this whole team after they just fired, like you said, the culture, the energy guy who was Robert Saleh, right? Like, people leaned on his energy in that building. Like, this, again, the risk reward just made no sense as to why they did it at the time that they did it, especially because leading up to that, the defense had been playing really well. Like, it played, besides that San Fran game, like, remember, Minnesota was scoring like 30-something points a game. I think they held him to like 17, right? And you fire him after that? Like, they lost because the offense didn't show up, not because the defense didn't show up.
Preach.
Aaron Rodgers throws a pick six. Like, so again, the timing just made no sense. And I said it right there and there. A lot of fans were mad at me, but they know me. They know I've been a Jet for life. I'm going to keep it real. I said the season's over, right? Because when you make a move like that, like, the strength of your team, you shock them, and it messes with them for the rest of the season. Not only that, you take your best coach on the staff, and you don't let him just focus on defense. Now you give him added responsibility, right? And that hurts the defense. And we've seen that the last couple of weeks. Like, the defense has not played up to the standard because the best coach on staff is the defensive coordinator, who's now the head coach, and he can't just focus on defense right now. So, again, the timing of it didn't make any sense. And, Mike, I love another point that you made, right? When you talk about roster building and roster construction, it's not just made on paper. I made this point earlier this season, right? It's made in the offseason, right? It's made through training camp. It's made through practice. So you can throw all the names you want to on a paper, but a team is built throughout the season and the offseason. It's not built on paper. So just trading for guys and then guys getting there midway through the season like Devontae, or a guy holds out like Hassan Reddick, that hurts team building and team bonding, right? That doesn't build continuity on your team. So, again, this is why roster construction is so important. And you said it, when guys are in free agency, sometimes it is mercenary for hire, right? They're going to the highest bidder because they want to be financially stable for the rest of their lives. And that's why I made the point about John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff, guys that grew up in the program. It means something to them, right? They've built bonds with those teammates. Like, they bled for the green and white. So that's why you don't let guys like that out of your building.
And you can get mercenaries when you are a team that has, so like the Chiefs right now.
Or you're winning, but you want more. You need that extra flair.
When they have the long-term culture in the building, they have the guys like the Mahomes, Kelseys of the world, who are the leaders entrenched already that can make everyone else fall in line beneath them. When it's all just brand new to everyone, there's just no bond keeping that team together, unfortunately. And we saw it with the Jets.
I mean, perfect example, the Rams, right? They were winning with Jared Goff, but they felt like they can get a little bit better at quarterback, so they got Stafford. So that culture was already in place when they went and got Odell Beckham Jr. or a Von Miller, right? Because the culture was already locked in with guys like Aaron Donald, with guys like Cooper Kupp, right? So their culture was already locked in. You can get away with that when that happens. But when you're the Jets and you haven't made it to the playoffs, you haven't had, winning ways, like, it's tough to try to do all that in one offseason. Like, people always compare it to Tom Brady and what the Bucs look like. You're talking about the GOAT. That is literally the GOAT doing that. And there were people that literally followed him because he is the GOAT. So, yes, he was the culture. So they didn't have the culture. he became the culture. And I think that was the biggest issue. People were thinking that Aaron Rodgers would bring in the culture, but that just simply wasn't the case, right? The culture has actually gotten worse since he's become the starting quarterback of the New York Jets. So I think that you have to essentially put that into perspective when people talk about Tom Brady. Like, he invented the Patriot way and that type of culture, right? So that's why they were able to have success in Tampa so fast.
It's funny because my whole career, it was every year we'd have a new OC, new O-line coach, new GM, new head coach 4 times. And it would always be me being suspect about leadership telling us that this is the right situation. This is the decision that'll get us where we want to go. And until you get to see it in the flesh and be a part of it, like at the end when I got to go practice with the Kansas City Chiefs essentially for 6 months, you can see that it's not something that you can describe. You have to feel it. You have to see it. And in order to have that, you have to have roster construction. You have to build through the draft.